Hello, this is Joe Simhart. I'm going to be talking about another topic in my series on cults in the occulture. And the topic for this talk is channeling, or the idea of someone being possessed by a spirit or some other entity and having that spirit speak through them for the edification of people and their cult following or whatever. So channeling. And so channeling might be a way of looking at the human being as kind of a telephone or a transmitter that transmits divine or information from the universe to other people that are caring to listen. So what I'm going to look at here are two things mainly, agency and influence formation. So what do I mean by agency? Typically, agency refers to our independent ability to act for ourselves in sociology, but it also means that we attribute agency to other things outside of ourselves. And they could be normal things like fire department as an agency that helps us with fires. But in the occult world, we can also attribute agency to things like rocks, like this crystal here. Back in the day, in the 1980s, there was a fad, and it still exists today. And in fact, it goes way back to ancient times that minerals and gems and gold and whatever had a particular quality where they were agents of certain kinds of energy. And depending on what the symbol formation in a particular culture was, that's what the rock would portray. And New Agers tended to believe that with their mind and their intent and cleansing these rocks with salt water in the sunshine, for instance, they could then program the rock, and then this thing would become infused with what they call the life force energies of the universe, right here. So if you believe that kind of thing, stuff would happen in your mind and your perceptions, and you would reify or prove to yourself that indeed this rock has agency because I believe it's charged with this kind of energy. But we're going to talk more about spirit possession and the other agents, in the sky or in the ethers or whatever, and what that's about, and how they develop influence formation or cults. One of the earlier, more modern forms of channeling, spirit possession, was the series called Seth Speaks. It came out in the early 1970s and was quite influential in the New Age movement, and dozens of similar groups came out, and people that were possessed by spirits and began to channel. One of the more popular channelers was a guy named Jack Purcell, and he was an insurance guy in the early 70s. He began to practice something called the Silva Method by Jose Silva. This guy influenced a number of groups out there, including Scientology and many self-help groups. So the Silva Mind Control later became the Silva Method because of the negative associations with mind control. But Jack Purcell, who was practicing this form of meditation that Silva prescribed, one day when he was with his wife in a room, dissociated, and this spirit appeared to take him over, and he began talking to Penny, his wife, and this being named Lazaris. And this is one of the books that came out in the late 1980s after he formed his cult following. So Lazarus appeared and spoke to Penny at length about mysterious and wonderful things. And when Jack came out of his trance, he didn't realize what he had done. And so she described to him what this was. And they began to start this movement called the concept synergy. Became very successful, one of the most successful channeling cults. They settled in Florida near Disney World and had $10 million or so complex of buildings that they lived in. Wife Penny died. She was quite overweight and ill in around 2000, 2001. And then her second husband, she divorced Jack, but they were very friendly. He committed suicide after. The movement was a little shook up by this because Lazarus was supposed to be this inspiring, enlightened being. Anyway, there's still many people that believe in Lazarus. So who is he? And Jack explained once in 1985, we are a spark of consciousness. So Lazarus is a complex being, a group. A spark of consciousness that does not have a form, content without form. Therefore, to talk with you, we use this body, meaning Jack. We use this mechanism so as to let you know we're communicating with you so that you know we are all the same. So, this is one of the New Age things. You and the universe are one. You strive for oneness. The perennial wisdom is coming out of the universe. You just have to tap into it and figure out what it is. Sometimes you need an agent to help explain that to you, and the agents could be these beings that channelers pick up on. In the 19th century, of course, this kind of spirit possession led to new religions, and one of the more famous today is what we call Mormonism. Joseph Smith was a channeler, and he spewed out all this information that was religious and poetic and developed the Book of Mormon out of it. Another one later, this Dr. What was his name? John Ballou. He channeled this Bible of sorts called OAHSPE, and it doesn't have a large following today, but it's very, very intriguing and complex and mysterious, and it's called A New Bible in the Words of Jehovah and His Angel Ambassadors. So he's channeling a sort of ascended beings or etheric beings in order to create this particular new sect, OAHSPE. Sometimes these channeling efforts are not successful, sometimes they are. For instance, J.Z. Knight is quite famous in this realm. She started channeling a being called Ramtha that appeared to her in her kitchen in 1977, a 7 or 8 foot tall angel-like being, and who possessed her body. She attracted a lot of celebrities early in her career, and her cult still runs out in Yelm, Washington, with quite a few followers, not without controversy. Some of these channeling groups fall apart, and I've met many that have fallen apart. In fact, I've caused a few to fall apart. One of them was this channeled book called The Teachings of the Angel of North America, and it was published by Dr. Patricia Ann Meyer, and she, like Penny, who was with Jack Purcell that started the Lazarus teachings, encouraged her husband, who was dissociating and channeling this angel of North America in front of her one day, to continue with it. And then she wrote the book. She actually tried to form like a cult following for him, and they had one follower that was supporting them, a business person down in Virginia. The wife got upset about how her husband got obsessed with this weird guy and his wife, and was spending a lot of money and also wanting to, spend tens of thousands to help them. So we did an intervention. It didn't work. He didn't really leave the group, but I got on the phone with the channeler, the gentleman that channeled this angel of North America, and spoke to him for over an hour and a half. And he was delusional. I mean, he really believed this. Whether his wife believed in it or not, obviously they were trying to start an enterprise, much like J.Z. Knight did or Lazaris, because there was a lot of money in this business. But they got into it late in the game, and apparently after the intervention, this whole thing of the Angel of North America just kind of died away. Maybe they felt they were being targeted and weren't going to make any money at it. I don't know. So I've had interactions with channelers earlier in their career, and one of them, a professor from the University of Cincinnati, channeled a being called Heltha, I went to one of those workshops because he was traveling the U.S. and beginning his following, and I questioned him while Heltha was possessing him among 50 people or so. We paid like $20 each to see him. And I questioned Heltha, and I kind of was able to prove that Heltha was not autonomous, not separate from Lyle by my questioning. And everybody got upset in the audience, told me to sit down because they wanted this puppet show to go on, this kind of mind puppet possessing Dr. Kohler. Kohler came up to me after the talk and he said, no one had ever grilled me like that or questioned me like that. What do you think is going on with me? And so we sat down and I explained to him what spirit possession was, and that in fact what he thought was an agent outside of himself called Heltha was really something he created in a way and part of his mind. And he was a performer, essentially. And somehow he never showed up again on the channeling circuit after talking to me. So this idea of agency and cult formation or influence formation is what I'm looking at with channeling. So what happens here? One of the books I read that helped me understand religious experience by Ann Teves on religious experience reconsidered. She talks about cognitively optimal and cognitively costly beliefs, and the idea of over-attributing agency to something. Like if we over-attribute agency to this rock and start making claims about its healing powers, start selling them for $200 each, and then we start getting complaints and lawsuits, we may have over-attributed agency to this rock and we can get in trouble, and then we have to back up from it because we can't prove it's really doing anything other than anecdotal evidence from people that buy the rock. So overvalued ideas, over-attributing agency is a very common flaw within the channeling cults that I've studied. So the channeler has to decide whether this is cognitively optimal, like many of the successful ones did, and they make a huge business out of it and make millions of dollars, or cognitively costly. Their claims are now backfiring on them, and they have to prove what they're saying, and they can't. And therefore it becomes costly, and then they back away from the enterprise. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about channeling right now. I hope you learned something from this talk, and thank you for listening.